Welcome to Living Well with MS, the podcast from Overcoming MS for people with multiple sclerosis interested in making healthy lifestyle choices. I'm your host, Jeff Alex. Thank you for joining us for this new episode. I hope it makes you feel more informed and inspired about living a full life with MS. Don't forget to check out our show notes for more information and useful links. You can find these on our website at overcomingms.org/podcast. If you enjoy the show, please spread the word about us on your social media channels. That's the kind of viral effect we can all smile about. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Now, without further ado, on with the show. Dr Sandra Neate is a clinician researcher who is head of the Neuroepidemiology Unit, or NEU, within the Melbourne School of Population and Global Health at the University of Melbourne in Australia. The NEU researches lifestyle-related risk factors in MS and health outcomes, and the experiences of people who adopt lifestyle modification. The NEU is also developing and researching novel ways to deliver evidence-based information about lifestyle modification to people with MS, including online modalities. Sandra's personal research interest is in talking with people with MS and their families regarding the experiences of lifestyle modification. Welcome to the programme, Dr Neate, or may I call you Sandra?
Of course, Jeff, thank you.
So you're presently head of Neuroepidemiology Unit at the University of Melbourne, or the NEU. I'm glad to say NEU because neuroepidemiology, I definitely get it wrong. Can you tell me what the NEU actually is?
Yes, we're quite happy to call it the NEU too. It is a mouthful. The Neuroepidemiology Unit is a research unit that sits within the Melbourne School of Population and Global Health, which is also a little bit of a mouthful, at the University of Melbourne here in Melbourne, Australia. We're a small group, relatively small group of researchers. There's 9 of us who come from clinical and research backgrounds, and the research backgrounds vary between sort of neuroscience and epidemiology, which looks at how often diseases occur in different groups of people and why. We have been there for 5 years, and we were set up with some very generous philanthropic funding from people with MS who've had experience with the Overcoming MS program. And our aim is really to research the risk factors that are known to influence the development and the progression of MS, and how the modification of those risk factors, those lifestyle factors, can affect health outcomes. And so we look at specific outcomes in MS like depression, fatigue, disability, but we also focus a lot on quality of life. That is, people's experience of their day-to-day lives. And we believe that it's extremely important the way a person experiences their life. They may have symptoms or they might not have symptoms, but their own personal experience of that is really what matters the most. So that's who we are and what we aim to do. There's other things that we like to undertake as well as that sort of major focus, and we also do some work where we talk to people or examine their written comments and try to gain a deeper understanding of people's experiences of lifestyle modification. And this is where we gain insights more into the way people feel and their experiences and their perspectives, which is a sort of a different kind of information, as well as just the sort of harder outcomes of health outcomes like disability and depression and fatigue.
So you're actually interested in the sort of subjective rather than just the objective. So you're not looking, because everyone else seems to be like, what's your EDSS score, or it's a really like defined number that they could put, or how many lesions are in this area of your spine or things like that. So you're also interested in actually how are people doing, how are they feeling?
Yes, that's right. And personally, that's my area of interest, and what the research projects that I tend to undertake are those what we call qualitative projects, where we talk to people. We also have talked to people's partners about their experiences of lifestyle modification and MS, and so we tend to try to broaden out the focus. I mean, all those hard outcomes like you refer to, your EDSS and all that are very important, and we certainly do examine those in great detail. We don't look at MRIs and things because all our information comes from patients. It's all patient-reported data. So we don't get MRI data and other things like that. But we do look at those outcomes like you described, but we also have this interest beyond that, or as well as that, in people's experiences and the insights that they are able to give us.
And is the NEU carrying on the research studies that were begun by your predecessor, Professor George Jelinek, who people might have heard of, such as HOLISM and STOP-MS?
We are. I mean, HOLISM and STOP-MS are still probably what we call our flagship projects, our flagship research projects. The HOLISM one is the really big one, and so far we've published about 40 peer-reviewed papers from HOLISM. And as people, I don't know whether they're familiar with HOLISM, but it's a survey of originally about 2,500 people with MS from all over the world who answered this questionnaire about their health and their habits. And we're now at the 7.5-year time point where the people who've participated in the study have provided data to us at baseline, 2.5, 5 and 7.5 years. So we now have this incredibly rich data about what people do and what their health outcomes are over time related to what they do with their life. So we can look at things like their diet and how much vitamin D they receive and how many stress-reducing activities they undertake, and look at the impact into the future on their health outcomes, such as depression, fatigue, disability and other things like that. So there's some really important studies coming up, or that we've published recently, and that are in front of journals at the moment. I think probably the most important one is one that we've just completed, which is called Higher Quality Diet and Non-Consumption of Meat are associated with less disability progression. So we've found that over the 2.5 years that a higher quality diet, like the Overcoming MS recommended diet, and in particular the non-consumption of meat, people who adopted those behaviours at the beginning, 2.5 years later have a significantly less disability progression. So some really important findings coming out of those studies where we look at what happens to people into the future, what we call prospective studies.
And what's the overarching aim of the NEU as a research body?
Well, our aims at the moment are to look at the impact of lifestyle modification on people with MS, on their outcomes and their quality of life, and to understand their experiences, as I said. But we also want to look into, in the future, which is, these are our sort of future directions, look at how we can best deliver the information that we have gained from the research that we've already done. So the things that we've learned about what can affect people and what those lifestyle behaviours can result in, we're attempting to determine what is the best way to deliver that message to people. So in the past, we've delivered face-to-face residential workshops over a period of time, the Overcoming MS workshops, where this information has been delivered to people, and we've researched, which is the STOP-MS project that you referred to, we've researched how attendance at one of those workshops influences people's outcomes over time. And we've had some interesting results there, of course, about improvements in quality of life and all those other outcomes that I described for people who attend and continue to adopt the modifications that are recommended. But obviously that's a very time-intensive way of delivering education, a face-to-face intervention with a certain number of people who can attend at one time. So we're also investigating an online course that delivers the same information just on the internet in the form, in a similar format to how the information is given during the workshops, but in an online forum. So that's just about to go live, our MS online course, and we're initially doing a feasibility study looking at how to deliver the course and how it's best delivered and how people experience the course. And then we'd like to roll out the course on a bigger level, on a greater level, and find out not only what people's experience of the course is, but does it change their behaviour and does it affect outcomes like we believe the residential retreats have done in the past. And so that's one big project. And we're also looking to do a similar thing, interestingly, in a collaboration with the UK MS Register, which is an enormous database kept over in the UK, and the Imperial College London, and we're hoping to do a trial in a similar way, looking at the delivery of an intervention and of an educational intervention and seeing how that affects people's outcomes, but also looking at how well people take to that intervention, whether they enjoy it, what they get from it, and whether they change their behaviour and whether that change in behaviour is continued into the future. So they're all the interesting questions that we want to know. What's the best way of delivering information? What's the best way of changing people's behaviour? How do people maintain that behaviour? And what are the outcomes if they're successful in doing that? So they're the main questions that we're looking to answer.
Just a quick reminder to our listeners that World MS Day is May the 30th. So consider marking it by donating to OMS and supporting the work we do to improve the lives of people with MS. You can make a donation online on our website at www.overcomingms.org. Thank you for your support. You mentioned there's a team of you working there. So who are the researchers that work for the NEU?
There's, apart from me, and I come from a clinical background as an emergency physician, believe it or not, but have transitioned over many years into research with an interest in these chronic conditions and the management of them by lifestyle modification. We have Associate Professor Tracy Wyland, who comes from a clinical psychology background actually, but has worked with us for many years. We have three senior researchers, Nipur Nag, Steve Simpson-Yap and Jeanette Rees, who come from epidemiological and neuroscience backgrounds. And we have some junior staff, some research assistant staff who do a lot of the work with analysing data and cleaning data and preparing research project applications and ethics applications and all the hard work in the background. And those people are Will Bevans, our PhD student. We have Alex Fideo and Maggie Yu and Zin Lin. Whether we have a very diverse group of people.
You're making sure you haven't forgotten anyone there.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone. I should have written them all down.
And so the MS Online course sounds really interesting, particularly at the moment as we're still going through lockdowns in various parts of the world. And I think the idea of having big face-to-face meetings is probably some way off. So what do you think the future impact, or what do you hope the future impact of that will be?
Well, I think it will be a resource that could be widely disseminated, amongst the MS community, and would be there for anyone who would like to undertake a course that is likely to lead to them being able to change their behaviour, and also just to understand what risk factors there are for the development and progression of MS, and how they can modify those risk factors, and how they can improve their lives basically and improve their health outcomes. So that's what we would hope, that this message is more widespread than it can be in a face-to-face version, that it's widely available, accessible, free, all those things that can help people access the information and make choices about their lives that might change their outcomes.
And you also mentioned collaboration of the UK MS Registry, which sounds amazingly promising as well. So what are your expectations of this relationship, and how can it elevate the cause of lifestyle intervention or modification?
What we're hoping to do, it's a bit of a long-term project. The first step is to do another observational study, that is to collect data from the people who are already within the UK MS Register, who are already contributing their data on an annual basis, and ask them the questions that the UK MS Register normally asks them about their health and their behaviours, and add a few more of ones of interest that we in the NEU are interested in. We're also interested in things like a sense of mastery. How much control do people feel they have over their lives? How many stressful life events they have, and those sort of quality of life things that we were describing before. So we're going to add a few more questions into their normal baseline questionnaire and follow people over a year to find out, like we have in HOLISM, what their outcomes are. And then what we want to do is a trial where we introduce an intervention, a bit like the MS online course, or perhaps a Zoom intervention, or perhaps a face-to-face intervention if that's possible, to deliver the Overcoming MS program to them and see whether that changes people's behaviour and whether that changes their outcomes. So we'll have all this information from the 1 year study that precedes that trial, and then we can look at what happens to those people. And so we'll have a lot more objective data, a lot more data, and data from another population, you know, a very cohesive population that the UK MS Register has developed over many years. And of course, from our point of view, it's exciting to collaborate with Dr Richard Nicholas, who's at Imperial College London, and Rod Middleton, who runs the UK MS Register, runs the data. He's from Swansea. So for us, it's also academically exciting to have those collaborations and affiliations, and to have their knowledge and enthusiasm added to ours. That's a very productive relationship, and one that we're excited about. It was unfortunately stalled through COVID, but we've just got it really up and running again, and have met everybody online again, and got the whole thing, trying to give the whole thing a kickstart again.
And what's on the horizon for the NU, and what sorts of projects and collaborations are you hoping for the future?
Well, really the two major ones are what I've just described, the MS online course, because that's just about to launch, so we want to do the big trial of that course as well. And the UK MS Register is the big one too, because they're really both in their infancy. We've got them sort of ready to go, but they haven't started. So they're the big projects into the future. We have other interests as well. We've got some interest in Parkinson's disease as well as MS, and we've got some projects going with a group called the Roy Morgan Group in Australia, who do a big population-based survey. They're actually market survey type people, but they've got an enormous amount of data, and we're looking at behaviours and things of people with neurological conditions. We've got other qualitative studies looking at the influence of a meditation course on people's lives, and those sorts of things. So we've got some other projects running in the background, but our HOLISM 7.5-year data and our MS online course and our UK MS Register are our big projects going forward into the future that have the potential to yield some very exciting results. And not only exciting results, but results that will be much more, not accepted, but randomised controlled trials are the sort of gold standard in terms of evidence. So it will build our evidence base enormously to have results from randomised controlled trials, and will have an impact on the neurological world, so to speak, that once those results are in, if they are what we hope they might be or what we expect, they could be very important to the management of people with MS.
So if people are interested in the MS online course, where would they find out more information about how to take that course in the future?
Well, we don't want them to know at the moment, because we want to run our...
Don't worry, no one's listening to this. It's just between you and me.
That's great. We want to run our intervention first. So to run an effective randomised controlled trial, you have to have people who don't know about it or who don't know what the course is about to deliver to them. And so they're in a control group and an intervention group. So once we've done that trial, then we would hope that that we can circulate the message broadly about how to access it and how to engage with it, etc. But I think we want to get that done as quickly as possible so that it can be put into circulation. But at the moment we're still testing it, because before we release it to the general population, we'd like to be confident that it's, number one, accessible and usable, and that it works and that people are benefiting from it.
And you've mentioned OMS a few times. So how does the NEU engage with OMS?
On many fronts. Number one, the evidence that the NEU provides underpins the Overcoming MS program that OMS, is the fundamental part of Overcoming MS charity. It's the recovery program, the 7-step recovery program. So we provide the evidence that underpins that, and we provide updates in research that can be circulated to the Overcoming MS population. And OMS assists us by supporting financially the open access publications of our work, meaning that these days journals charge you to put your work online so that someone can click on your article and read the full text of the article. So that's quite an expensive proposition, and OMS supports the open access publication, meaning that anybody who wants to read the article, whether they're a neurologist or a member of the public or someone with MS, can click on the article and read it, not having to have special access through a university library, etc. So that's an enormous assistance to us and to the MS population to have that information freely available. We also engage in forums like this and with blogs and other things like that. We've had a long relationship with OMS, and the two things are so closely intertwined in some ways that it's hard to describe, because there's this two-way flow of information, and it's just a relationship that's existed for a long time. And although the NEU is clearly a very separate organisation, and when it comes to being a research body, you must be very clear that you have a research agenda that is not influenced by external parties. But there's a clear relationship there that I think that's beneficial to both parties.
And just as a final question, in your opinion, what do you think the next generation can realistically expect for MS treatment?
I think there will be an enormous acceptance of, as there is in many other diseases now, like in heart disease and stroke and things like that, that what you do, what the choices you make with your life, your diet, your level of activity, whether you smoke, whether you drink, all those sorts of things will be the key to you remaining well. I mean, we all have an enormous influence on our own health just by what we choose to do every day. And I think that will be the key message that underpins the management of any chronic condition, any autoimmune condition, that you can influence this condition yourself by the choices you make daily. I think there are many treatments emerging on the horizon. I'm no expert in the pharmacological management of MS, but I know that the pharmacological management is becoming more and more promising and more effective. And so I think that people can realistically hope for good outcomes after being diagnosed with MS, that if they take the time to understand the evidence and the possibilities that are there, and they make informed choices, that they can expect, and they are assisted by their healthcare professionals, whoever they may be. They may be a very broad team of healthcare professionals. They can realistically hope for a long and healthy life.
With that, thank you very much for joining us on Living Well with MS, Dr Sandra Neate.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Well with MS. Please check out this episode's show notes at overcomingms.org/podcast. You'll find all sorts of useful links and bonus information there. Do you have questions about this episode or ideas about future ones? Email us at podcast@overcomingms.org We'd love to hear from you. You can also subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Living Well with MS is kindly supported by a grant from the Happy Charitable Trust. If you'd like to support the Overcoming MS charity and help keep our podcast advertising free, you can donate online at overcomingms.org/donate. Thank you for your support. Living Well with MS is produced by Overcoming MS, the world's leading multiple sclerosis healthy lifestyle charity. We are here to help inform, support and empower everyone affected by MS. To find out more and subscribe to our e-newsletter, please visit our website at overcomingms.org. Thanks again for tuning in and see you next time.